In our episodes, we discuss cases and topics that might be distressing or disturbing to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a bonus episode coming to you from my car in a parking lot. Why? I don't really know. I have a lot of just recent news stories that I want to talk about, and then I have a couple of shows and documentaries that I also need to rant about. I've been watching a lot of series, I've been watching a lot of documentaries, and I want to talk about them. So first, I'm going to spend a couple minutes just talking about some recent news stories that have caught my eye, and there's not a lot of information out there on them, so that'll go pretty quick. But then there's 4 documentaries / series that I want to talk about. I want to talk about Death in Apartment 603, which is about Ellen Greenberg. I want to talk about My Father, the BTK Killer. I want to talk about Monster, the Ed Gein Story, and I want to talk about The Perfect Neighbor. So that'll be at the end. But first, let's talk about some news stories that have just caught my eye. Now, the first one is really a horrific story that's developing in Cleveland, Ohio. So on September 13th, Ontavia Kennebrew says she dropped her 5-year-old daughter off at a family member's home in Cleveland. And now, at a certain point, her daughter goes outside and is allegedly confronted by a group of kids. Now, the article that I'll link says a group of kids, but only 2 kids have ultimately been charged. But what they did to this 5-year-old girl is so horrific. A 9-year-old boy and a 10-year-old girl beat up this 5-year-old, raped her, and tried to kill her. A 9 and a 10-year-old. Now, the victim's mother eventually found out that she had been attacked and was able to go over to where EMS was treating her, and she was quoted as saying, "What I saw was unbelievable. My daughter was not my daughter. Her hair was scalped from her head. She had bruises and blood all over her body. Her eyes were filled with blood. Her lips and mouth were filled with blood. Her nails had debris and dirt in them." Now, the 2 kids, the 9 and 10-year-old, are facing initial charges of attempted murder, felonious assault, kidnapping, and strangulation. And I just want to, for a second, think of how on earth 2 kids so young could even come up with something like this. I would be surprised if they were not being abused themselves at their own homes. I mean, kids have to learn this type of behavior from somewhere. And I would also be surprised if there weren't red flags. And now, because the 2 child offenders are children, their information is not being released to the public. So I don't know if they were related, how, or if they knew this 5-year-old girl, but it's just horrific. It makes me think of Aiden Fucci, who, when he was 14, killed 13-year-old Tristan Bailey. Now, Fucci is a few years older than these kids, right? But he displayed warning signs for sure. He told friends that he thought of killing people often. And I have to wonder if there were similar warning signs in this case. I have talked about this before in this podcast, but the concept of leakage is really fascinating to me, and I think more people need to be aware of it. But this is one case that we're following here, so if there's any updates, I'll do another bonus episode and let you know. This case and the next one, I think the investigations are still ongoing, so I will link to phone numbers if you are out there and happen to have any information on this. Now, another story that's been going around that you may have heard of, I don't have a lot of information on it right now, but the remains of 23-year-old Kada Scott were found in a shallow grave near an abandoned middle school in Philadelphia. Now, Kada had been missing since early October and had last been seen leaving her job at an assisted living facility, but she never made it home. Now, the facility didn't have surveillance cameras, but her vehicle was found, still at the facility. And there was immediate concern when she went missing because she had been reporting to friends and family that she had been being harassed in the weeks before. Now, she didn't mention any specific names, but she said individuals, or perhaps a single person, had been harassing her over the phone. Now, eventually, an anonymous tip led investigators to where her remains were ultimately discovered. And there has been an arrest in this case. 21-year-old Keon King of Dover, Delaware, was arrested and charged with kidnapping, stalking, and other charges relating to Kada's disappearance. Now, he hasn't been charged yet with murder, but District Attorney Larry Krasner said at a news conference, quote, "I am confident that homicide charges will be brought, but I also have an obligation to follow the law and uphold the Constitution, and that means we don't take shortcuts." Now, King's bail was set at $2.5 million, and making this case even more controversial, outside of the horrific loss of Kada Scott, was in January of this year, King was arrested and accused of kidnapping and strangling a woman. But the charges were dropped after the victim, who survived, didn't appear in court. Now, I don't know if that woman was Kada or if this was another woman, but many are wondering how these charges could have been dropped. And I know I have seen cases where this has happened, and I think it's usually because outside of the victim's own testimony that they were assaulted, there just isn't evidence against the person. And that is putting so much on the victim. I mean, I wouldn't want to go and testify either, right? And I mean, I think there's a lot of legal considerations for these types of cases, of why these charges are dropped, and I'm just not an expert in that. But nevertheless, it's just so tragic. Had he been in prison, Kada Scott would likely still be alive. And lastly, I'm sure you have all heard about the Louvre, right? Just days ago, at literally 9:30 in the morning, multiple men, like skilled men, backed a truck up to the Louvre, hoisted up a massive ladder in broad daylight, climbed up it, got inside the Louvre, went to the section of the Louvre that has, like, I believe the French crown jewels or something like that. They used a glass cutter, took a bunch of the jewels, and just left. They literally, like, hopped out the window, went down the ladder, and apparently, like, dropped one of the crowns on the way, so they, you know, the museum was able to get that back. They apparently tried to burn their truck, but yeah, just like up and left, got away. Like hundreds of millions of dollars in stolen jewels in broad daylight. And this is crazy. And, you know, like history buffs, like I'm sure this is a loss. I'm not familiar with like the significance of the items that were taken or whatever, but like after reading so many true crime stories, and there's always, you know, news of mass shootings, like isn't it just kind of nice every now and then to have like a good old-fashioned heist, right? Like this just feels like a little bit more lighthearted. But I can literally see the gears turning at Netflix right now. You know that every major movie production company or service or whatever, they're literally all jumping at the bit trying to make this into a movie or series. Like they're probably casting the robbers as we speak. Right? And so they think that the jewels were either stolen by people who had been hired by a collector, or that they've already been just like dismantled, like the jewels all taken out of the necklaces or whatever and sold. But wow, I mean, kind of like props to them, like in broad daylight. That is bold, but also kind of embarrassing for security at the Louvre. Like, how does something like that happen? I feel like I read that they were, like, some of the robbers were wearing construction vests, so it might have been like they just really didn't know that these were robbers coming in. But I just can't imagine. Like the head of security at the Louvre right now is like probably sweating. Like that's not great. But you know, honestly, I don't know. It's like kind of a funny story. Thankfully, no one was hurt. I don't know if these robbers had guns or what, but I could see, you know, potentially could have gone worse. So I'm glad it didn't. And yeah, so like there's a little bit of like somewhat lighthearted crime news, you know. Let me know what you think about this. And if we see, you know, any updates in this, once again, we'll have another bonus episode. Okay, there are 4 documentaries / shows I want to talk about. Some of them I thought were okay. One of them was absolutely phenomenal, highly recommend, and one of them I hated. I absolutely hated. We'll get to it. The first one that I watched was Death in Apartment 603, and this is covering the case of Ellen Greenberg. Now, if you are unfamiliar with Ellen Greenberg and her case, in January of 2011, her fiance found her dead in their apartment with 20 stab wounds. This case is highly controversial because very soon after, her death was ruled a suicide, and many wonder how that's possible. I mean, stabbing suicides happen, but they are extremely rare. And in Ellen Greenberg's case, she had stab wounds to the back of her head and neck, and it just seems incredibly unlikely and impossible that she died by taking her own life. But this documentary series on Hulu goes into it. It is obviously a documentary coming at it from the perspective that she was murdered, and specifically that she was murdered by her fiance. I will say, I think they did a really good job laying out what happened in this case. There's 3 episodes to this little documentary series. They go really in depth with the timeline. You get interviews with Ellen's friends, with her coworkers. Her parents are heavily involved, some of their private investigators. Her fiance at the time, Sam Goldberg, is not interviewed. They did not interview the medical examiner in the original case, who first ruled it a homicide, but then changed their ruling to suicide. So some of the key players that I think have contributed to the controversy are not interviewed in this. So if you're wanting an unbiased view of this case with just the facts laid out, this is not the documentary that's going to do that for you. But if you want to learn more about the case, it is put together really well, and I did enjoy it. It was very informative. I will say I am going to have a solo episode coming out here in just a couple weeks on Ellen Greenberg's case, because just a couple days ago on October 10th, the current chief medical examiner in Philadelphia did a, quote, independent and unbiased review of Ellen's case and published their opinion. And they said, once again, they believe her death was a suicide. Now, Ellen Greenberg's case isn't one that I've ever really gone very deep into. I've listened to other coverage on it. So I wanted to just do some research on my own, kind of without the influence of other people's opinions. So I read through police reports, autopsy reports, the current chief medical examiner's opinion. I read through all of it. I kind of compared the timeline. So I did my best in this episode to lay it all out in the most unbiased way that I could. And then I gave my opinion at the end. And I want to know what you think about this case. It's very controversial. I can see why people believe it was a suicide, but part of me does lean towards homicide just because of a few, elements. But yeah, let me know what you think about it. It was a really good documentary series. I would recommend watching it if you are curious about this case. It's on Hulu. The next documentary that I watched was called My Father, the BTK Killer. This one is on Netflix. Now, this is not a documentary to watch if you are wanting an in-depth view at Dennis Rader and his crimes. As the title suggests, this documentary series is mostly about Dennis Rader's daughter, Carrie Rawson, and it's coming at it from her perspective. So Carrie Rawson talks about learning that her father was the BTK killer. They talk about how they came to that conclusion and how she unknowingly played a role in him being identified. It talks about her grieving process and what that was like, and how, a lot of her family members have chosen to stay silent. They want to remain anonymous. I don't blame them. And so she talks about how she spent a lot of time not talking about her father and his crimes. And after a while, it seemed like everything was building up. And so one day she wrote this really long article laying out everything from her perspective. And she said it felt really freeing to be able to just talk about it. And I think you can tell that she has struggled maybe with her decision to talk about her dad and all of that over the years. But you can really tell she wants to take this horrific thing and make it into something good. So she volunteers a lot of her time and helps out police departments, investigating deaths that they believe might be linked to Dennis Rader. That is one of the kind of the big things that flows throughout the documentary. There were some unsolved murders, and they believe it could have been an additional victim of BTK. So they bring in Carrie Ross in, and they kind of go back through timelines and try to see if she can remember what she was doing during that time, what her father was doing during that time. It's a really interesting perspective. And, you know, I think Carrie Rawson has, for some reason, gotten a lot of hate over the years. And I don't understand why. Some people claim that she's, like, trying to cash in on being BTK's daughter. And it's like, in my opinion, she's never gonna escape, you know, Dennis Rader being her dad. I mean, she says it in the documentary. I mean, she looks just like him. And so I think you can either do your best to avoid it, which it seems like some people in her family have tried to do, and like that's great if that works for them, but it seems like for her the only thing she can do is try to have something good come out of it. So she's been really outspoken in trying to be there for the families of people who commit these horrific crimes, because I think a lot of people forget that like they can be victims too. And so it was really interesting to hear from her and her perspective. There were some, you know, really sad moments where she starts to wonder if she had been assaulted by her dad when she was younger. So that was kind of difficult to hear. But it was a good one. I would recommend that documentary as well. I definitely think it's for people who are familiar with BTK and his crimes. They get a little into it, but not too much. Now, the next one I want to talk about, also on Netflix, and that is Monster, the Ed Gein Story. I am being so serious right now. I absolutely hated it. I watched the first episode and it got like 2 minutes into the second and I couldn't do it. I could not finish this. And I've been trying to think a lot about why this show bothered me so much. And I haven't watched the other Monster series. I know that they've done, I think they're produced or directed by Ryan Murphy, who did the American Horror Story series. And he did Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story. He did one on the Menendez brothers, and now there's Ed Gein. There might be another one, I'm not sure. But I sat watching this, and like, I liked the first couple seasons of American Horror Story, so I thought maybe I would like this too, but it was just so over the top, like even the first episode, that I could not continue. I couldn't do it. And so a lot of what I'm basing my opinion on now, thinking of it, is like what other people have said about it, so this might be biased, but people have said that in it, it's not only factually inaccurate, right? Like they try to claim that one of his victims was this woman who has never actually been connected to Ed Gein before. A lot of people have said that there is just extensive amounts of just showing the torture of his victims, like to a point where it's like, it's ridiculously graphic and violent. And I don't want to, you know, make it seem like I'm a prude here, because I watch shows that are graphic and violent, right? Like I love The Walking Dead. I love anything with zombies. I obviously listen to true crime and whatever. You know, I like Quentin Tarantino movies, and those can be pretty graphic. But when it is just like the explicit showing and like, I don't know, like graphic presentation of like women being tortured and murdered, I feel like it comes to a certain point where it's like, what is this for? You know what I mean? Like, we understand what happened to them, and you can show that in a way that isn't so just like outright like over the top and gratuitous. And it makes me think like there have been a couple of stories in the news that I've heard about, and one of them was this like AI YouTube channel that was dedicated to, like, all it was these AI depictions of women begging for their lives and then being shot in the head. And like, it was just hours upon hours of videos like this. And like, think of the creeps that go and sit and watch stuff like that. You know what I mean? And there's already such a problem with like men hating women and like being violent towards women, that to have a show that is going to be so big on Netflix from someone who like all of his shows, TV shows and movies, whatever, they all get so much attention. So to just outright be showing so much violence against women in a way that is just so over the top, like, it was giving me the ick. There is a way I think you can present stuff like this where it's not the complete glorification of this violence. I don't know. That bothered me. I heard people saying that the violence was just so over the top. And then another thing I noticed, I could tell that they really wanted you to feel bad for Ed Gein. And now, look, like, I am 100,000% all for better understanding the backgrounds of serial killers and these murderers, because I think it's really important to understand what might have contributed to, you know, however it is that they ended up to be so violent. Because many of these people do have backgrounds that make me feel bad for them. It doesn't, you know, excuse what they've done, but I think there's so much that we can learn from it. But from what others have said, this was just different. It was like they weren't trying to just show you how he grew up. They were really trying to make you almost like be on his side, which obviously is gross. So I've seen a lot of people say they did not like this. I've seen some people say that they did. This show gave me the ick. I do not recommend. But if you watched all of it, let me know what you thought. Maybe I need to give it another chance. Maybe I'm being too hard on it. I don't know. The last documentary that I watched, and it's going to be a miracle if I can get through talking about this one without bawling my eyes out, is called The Perfect Neighbor. It's on Netflix. Now, this is coming from Florida, and it's a true story. Obviously, it's a documentary, and it's following this woman named Susan. And Susan is an angry old woman who repeatedly calls police because there are kids playing in a vacant lot next to her apartment. She doesn't own this lot. The kids got permission from the lot owner to play there, but she just, for some reason, is so upset about kids being joyous and happy and playing that she is repeatedly calling 911. So this documentary is almost entirely told through the use of body cam footage, and it was so compelling the way that they did it. You know, in most documentaries, how they'll have like a sit-down interview with, like, you know, someone, and it's like lit really well and looks really cinematic and professional. There is nothing like that in this documentary. It's almost entirely body cam footage. There's a couple B-roll shots, like cinematic B-roll shots, with the audio from interviews, like police interviews, over top of it. And all of that narrates this entire story. And then in the end, there's like actual like interview footage from when, spoiler alert, Susan is arrested. Now, the documentary kind of reaches its climax when Susan shoots her neighbor, Ajika Owens. And you can watch the documentary for kind of seeing what led up to this. But the part that just gutted me was there's doorbell footage, and it shows when this woman's son runs over and is banging on the door, begging his neighbor for help because his mom had just been shot. So you see him, and he is just horrified and scared. And then, you know, there's a really dramatic police response. There's first responders trying to give her CPR. They take her away in the ambulance, and they have body cam footage, and they show you the moment that their kid's father, who is called to, you know, come there to watch them because obviously the mom is being hauled off in the ambulance. It shows footage of the kid's father finding out that she doesn't make it, which is gutting. And then it shows when the kids find out, and it's just so sad. See, I told you I was not going to be able to make it through talking about this one without crying. I cannot even explain to you, like, I'm an emotional person, and it really doesn't take a lot to make me cry watching, movies and documentaries and stuff like this. But I have not sobbed harder than I did watching this documentary. So much so that it's been days, and it's still, like, I'm still thinking about it. It was so sad. It was so well done. But, so you have this event, right? You have this woman being shot and killed by Susan, the insufferable racist neighbor. And, it goes on, and you're wondering if she's going to be arrested. Susan is interviewed, and they let her go. They just let her go. And it's really unbelievable. Now, at the end of the movie, they put up a statistic, and it says, stand your ground laws have been linked to an 8 to 11% increase in homicide rates, or roughly 700 additional deaths each year. Research has found huge racial disparities, with white Americans much more likely to find success with self-defense claims, particularly when they kill Black people. That was really, I think, what the documentary was trying to highlight, because Susan is trying to say that she fired in self-defense. And if you go and watch it, which I 100% highly recommend that you do, you'll see why, like, those claims of self-defense are so bogus. But I will say, like, I believe those statistics, and I have experience with that, and I can 100% see why Black Americans would be, I think, less likely to get away with using that as a defense. When I spent a little time working as an investigator at our public defender's office, we had a client who had shot and killed a man in self-defense. And so part of my job was to go through, read the file, figure out the circumstances, really understand and verify his claim that he was doing it in self-defense. And I do believe he was. He was disabled. There were multiple witnesses who said that the person who started beating him just came up and started literally beating the crap out of him. And he took his gun out and shot at him, and the man died. Well, that didn't matter. He was still found guilty of manslaughter. And so I think personally, I need to do more research on stand your ground laws. Just the surface level knowledge of what I know about them makes me not like them. I just think they would be way too easy to be weaponized. Right? Like, you can claim it's self-defense when there really was no threat to you, but then, like, in practice, really hard to actually achieve. You know what I mean? So I want to do more research into it, but these are the types of documentaries that I really like. Ones that make you think at the end of it, right? And this one wasn't, like, super in your face, trying to advocate, really hard against, certain gun laws, but they just put that up at the end as, like, something to consider. And even before they put up that statistic, I mean, you were spending the ending of this documentary really wondering if Susan is going to get away with it. And so I really enjoy documentaries like that. I think this one and the Netflix series Adolescence are ones that really make you stop and think. And I would highly recommend you watch it. So, The Perfect Neighbor, it's on Netflix. So good. So much I think you can learn and take away from it. I really think it gives you insight into other people's lives and just some of the things that they go through that you might not consider if you're not from a lower income neighborhood or if you're not a person of color, right? Like, Susan, the neighbor, she was clearly a racist old woman. And yeah, it just, some people think, I feel like some people believe that racism is not alive and well in our country. That is clearly not true. So if you've seen this, let me know what you think about it. I really enjoyed it, even though it was absolutely gut-wrenching and infuriating. But yeah, but guys, that's all I have for you today. So this was kind of an impromptu. I'm literally recording this in my car. Let me know what you think about the 2 news stories that we talked about and what you think of those documentaries. We will see you next week with part 5 of our coverage of the 1980 murders of Rose Burkert and Roger Atkinson. We're going to be going down to Mississippi and talking about another unsolved murder that many people believe is connected. We will see you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of Cardinal Crimes. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing, giving us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast, and sharing this episode with others. You can find us on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram with the handle @CardinalCrimes, and you can send us any case suggestions, questions, or topics you would like covered there or to our email, cardinalcrimes@gmail.com. Until next time, friends, take care of each other and take care of yourself. If you've ever thought about starting your own podcast, there's no better place to begin than with Buzzsprout. It's the platform I use, and it makes publishing, promoting, and tracking your episodes so easy, even if you're not tech savvy. Plus, they help you get listed in all the major directories like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and more. And here's the best part. When you sign up for a paid Buzzsprout plan using my affiliate link, you'll get $20 off, and you'll be supporting the show at the same time. Just head to the description of this episode to find the affiliate link. Now, let's get back to the episode.